Hey fly tiers, Darren here. Welcome back to another fly tying tutorial. Today we're going to be tying a pattern called the Magic Midge. This comes from a fly tyer in Alberta named Brent Schlenker. And he fishes primarily still waters, some of the lakes in southern Alberta quite often. But I think this might make actually a good fly to try out on the rivers this spring. So it's one I might put in my box for next week's opener. We'll see how that goes. So for the material here, I've used a Chartreuse holographic underbody, and over top I've used a product called Magic Stretch. So make sure you leave a comment below to get entered into our draw. Let's have a look at the material list and get started. Let's get a fresh hook in the vise. So today I'm going to be using a Firehole 315. We're just going to slip a glass bead onto there. And one of the nice things about having a barbless hook is you don't have to struggle with putting beads onto the hook shank at all. And we're going to put that in the vise tilted a little bit forward. And this will help us get at the back end of the hook so that we don't have to have an awkward angle getting into the back. So I'm going to be using a Danville 6/0 Chartreuse and on a size 12 Firehole 315. So let's go ahead. We've got our bead on there. We'll just put our thread on in behind the bead. We'll trim off the tag end. So we want to try and keep this pattern fairly thin. So we're going to tie in our materials just behind the eye. And we're going to be using some of the UNI-Holo in Chartreuse. This one's a little bit thick for my taste, but it works not too bad. So we'll just get that secured in behind the bead. And then we're going to take a product called Stretch Magic, which is a flexible cord material that's used for bead necklaces, that sort of thing. It's something I use on some of my chironomid patterns, but it's got a nice stretch. You can give it a pretty good pull, and it's fairly durable. So we'll tie that on in behind the bead as well. And we're just going to kind of pull that Stretch Magic out as we tie down the holographic tinsel and the Stretch Magic. We're going to tie that into the bend of the hook. We want to try and keep close touching turns just so that the Stretch Magic doesn't bubble out. If you do kind of miss a couple of wraps, you'll get a bit of a bump. So we'll take that down to where we want to stop, and then we'll wrap our thread back up to the front. We're going to add a half hitch here, just for a little bit of safety. We don't want our thread popping off. So we're going to take our holographic tinsel and we're going to start winding that. You want to make sure you kind of pull it on that first wrap just so that you don't have a little bump sitting there. And we'll just overlap that slightly. We'll put a little bit of tension on it as we wrap it up. And once we get behind the bead, we'll just trap that with a couple wraps. It is a little bit awkward in behind the bead, but it's not terribly bad. Alright, and again, we'll add a half hitch here just to make sure that we don't lose our wraps on the end. Just at this angle, it's easy to bump the thread and have everything come unraveled. So we're going to take our Stretch Magic and we're going to start wrapping that. We want these to be touching turns. And the cord, you can push it just to make sure that it's butted up against itself. And every couple wraps I'll do that just to make sure that we've got a solid body. and it'll go back over the hook a little bit, and that's fine. So what I'm doing here is just, I've got a shorter length, so I don't want it to come unwrapped, and I've just adjusted the hook. So sometimes I will just put my finger in behind on a wrap just to make sure that it doesn't come unwrapped while I'm pulling it over. And we'll just continue that until we get in behind the bead, and then we'll tie that off. And want to make sure that you secure this down fairly well and that it's crossed back as well, just so that the stretch magic is locked in place. So next we're going to take a little bit of head cement, and this is the Loon water-based cement. We'll just add a small coat just to the top, just to make sure that those wraps aren't going to pop out. If you have a UV resin, this is a perfect use for it here. I've actually had a bit of a hiccup with mine in that I killed my light, so I have to wait for a new one to come in the mail. And until then, I'm just going to be going old school with this. So I've got a couple Peacock herls. I just pulled those off the stem and trimmed off the butt ends. And we'll tie those in right behind the bead. And then we're just going to take both of the herls and we'll wrap them forward. And 3 or 4 times is probably good. And then we will tie them off with our thread. And I like to make sure I go behind and in front just to make sure that that material is locked and it's not going to slip out. We'll trim off the excess. And now we'll add a whip finish to the fly. Make sure we seat that knot. We'll add a second one for insurance. We'll trim off our thread. And then we'll just take a little bit of that head cement and we'll just add a dab right where the Peacock herl meets our tying thread, just a little bit on top just to secure that. Hey fly tiers, thanks for stopping by and checking out my fly tying videos. If you enjoyed the video and want to show your support, hit the thumbs up and share it to your social networks. I hope you consider subscribing to the channel, and if you do, be sure to hit the bell icon to get notifications on my latest fly patterns, tips, and reviews. If you have a question or comment, leave a message below. You'll also be entered into the next draw for some of the flies I tie and a few stickers. Until next time, this is Darren saying, keep a hook in your vise. Cheers.